all these plants, we've grown them just to destroy them in a few months. But why exactly are we doing this? We're back at our spring barley demo site at Beal in November. Previously, this field would have been left in stubble over winter, but now it's full of radishes, vetches and rye. But why? This is cover cropping. It's a method that dates back many, many years, but it's becoming more topical as farmers try and find ways to become more efficient. We are in our 4th season of experimenting with cover crops here, and we have learned a lot. So today we're going to share with you our top 3 findings, but first let's have a look at what cover crops really are. I have got some species that we have growing in our cover crop trial this year. So I have some brassicas over here, and a couple benefits of brassicas are they have really good rooting structures for breaking up soil compaction. They can also be grazed as well, so they can grow quite a good bit of biomass on top of the soil. So in this hand I've got some Phacelia, and this is a good non-brassica option if you're trying to break up soil compaction because it's got a good root on it, just in case some people have got oilseed rape in their rotation and they're worried about club root. I also have some vetch, and vetch is a legume, so it's nitrogen fixing. So I've just dug up this and I can see some nice nodules on the roots, so that's really promising. Vetch is also good because they have fibrous roots instead of tap roots, which means they can be useful for breaking up that top layer of soil, whereas these species will grow further down into the ground, which leads us perfectly into the first thing that we've learned. So it's really important to understand what you're trying to achieve from your cover crops. So for example, here at Beal, we've set out the goal of trying to improve the soil whilst also maintaining the quality of the following spring barley crops. So if you're looking for something for livestock grazing, or you're trying to reduce nutrient leaching, or any of the other benefits that cover crops can offer, we have definitely learnt that species choice is key. So as I mentioned in my last point, one of our aims is to try and maintain that malting spec for our following spring barley crop. We have a couple of different nitrogen fixing species in the trial. Sometimes a bit of uncertainty about how nitrogen from the cover crops can affect the grain nitrogen. Last year, after the cover crop trial and before we drilled the following spring barley, we took a soil mineral nitrogen test, and this allowed us to find out how much nitrogen was in the soil, which tells us what effect the cover crops had on nitrogen in the soil. From the test, we actually discovered that the cover crops had taken up nitrogen from the soil because the untreated plot had more nitrogen left in the soil. So hopefully this meant that the cover crops reduced the amount of nutrient leaching during the winter, and hopefully those nutrients were returned when the cover crops were incorporated back into the soil. When we harvested the spring barley and they were tested in our lab, we found that the grain nitrogen was well within the malting barley specifications last harvest. So our second key finding is that we've been able to hit malting barley spec for a few years now after cover crops, whilst also reducing our nitrogen input by 10 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. This is our spring barley demo site, so our cover crops are following spring barley, which means we're probably drilling the cover crops later than what we would usually want to. So really we are at the mercy of the weather as to how successful our cover crops can be. Last autumn and this autumn have been very different in terms of how our cover crop trial is looking. Last autumn they were drilled after our spring barley. We had a lot of rain during the autumn and the cover crops didn't establish as well, which means if our cover crops weren't as successful, then our benefits that we're getting out of the cover crops aren't as good. This autumn has been very different. It's been mild, it's been quite a kind autumn, so our cover crops have grown much better. So hopefully we'll start to see some more benefits over the years from them. So our third and final key finding is that establishment date is key. and we've definitely seen this in the past few years. So the three most important things that we've learned from doing these trials over the past few years is that species choice is really important. We've been hitting our malting barley spec, and drilling date is key. So we'll be back here in the spring to see how they've done.